Welcome to the Business of Drinks, where we go behind the bottle, interviewing beverage innovators and icons about how they built their businesses.
We take a data-driven approach, analyzing the brands, products, and categories that get customers and consumers excited.
And we cover several drinks categories, from wine, beer, and spirits to non-alcoholic drinks, as well as THC, adaptogen, and functional beverages.
So whether you're working in drinks or just interested in the stories behind your favorite brands, join us each week as we explore how companies are unlocking growth at every stage in the game.
Thanks for joining us, and let's dive in. Welcome back to the Business of Drinks podcast, where we deep dive into the stories of the entrepreneurs, visionaries, and creators who are shaping the future of the beverage industry. I'm Erica Ducey.
And I'm Scott Rosenbaum. Today, we're thrilled to spotlight a winery that is as iconic as it is forward-thinking. I'm talking, of course, about Silver Oak in Napa and Alexander Valleys. This is a brand that is a classic. It's instantly recognizable to those who have been in the business for a while, as well as neophytes. I know personally, my brother-in-law gifted my wife and myself a bottle of Silver Oak Cab when we got engaged. So this conversation is a real treat.
Oh, I love that. As our listeners may or may not know, Silver Oak has been setting the gold standard for Napa Cabernet Sauvignon since 1972. It's a family owned brand and it's earned a legendary reputation, not just for its wine, but also for its incredible ability to evolve while staying true to its roots. It's rare to see a brand this steeped in heritage while also so plugged in to cultural relevancy.
Yeah, that's exactly what makes Silver Oak so fascinating, right? They do, what you might expect. They, orchestrate everything from exclusive dining experiences with celebrity chefs, but they also do other things like they rolled out, an unexpected collaboration by, coming up with wine luggage in collaboration with a brand called Paravel. So they're really redefining what it means to be a modern winery by leaning into doing such things. And they're approachable. They're, as we've said before, really meeting consumers where they are. So they've got this blog series, Silver Oak Bottle Stories, where they showcase customers drinking Silver Oak Cab at different special occasions. So it's really about the community as well as promotion. They're telling a story to their customers and with their customers.
Right. I mean, there's so many facets to the brand, and they are exclusive on some levels, but also not afraid to have fun. So, Silver Oak's YouTube channel has racked up millions of views with this sort of, tongue in cheek and fun educational content like how to open a wine bottle without a corkscrew. Spoiler alert, get out your shoe. So, it's that kind of clever, accessible engagement that's winning over a new generation of wine drinkers.
They're a great example of a brand that has branched out from their core consumer, that baby boomer audience that originally discovered them in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And now they're connecting with millennials and Gen Xers and even younger consumers. They are really focused on telling the same story, that of their Napa Cab and their Sonoma Cab. They're only two SKUs, but they're telling it in different languages to different audiences. So they're repeating, right? They're marketing it very consistently, but in very different voices. And this is really how they balance their tradition with their innovation.
Yeah. And David Duncan, the proprietor and CEO, he is the perfect person to share these insights. As the second generation owner, he's been instrumental in expanding Silver Oak's reach, in growing their vineyard holdings and implementing sustainability initiatives, including achieving LEED Platinum certifications for their wineries. But what I love most is how deeply personal his approach is, whether he's interacting with fans at the winery or sharing the stories behind every bottle.
Exactly. David's leadership is all about staying true to this vision while embracing change, right? And that might be through sustainability initiatives, through community and marketing engagement, right? And, even navigating the evolving landscape of the wine market, we might think of Silver Oak as a traditional iconic classic, but they don't view themselves necessarily through that lens solely. And in that way, I think our listeners are really going to love hearing from David and how he thinks about the industry.
On that note, let's dive in. Here's our conversation with David Duncan, where we discuss everything from Silver Oak's origin story to its strategies for staying relevant and beloved across generations. Trust us, this is one you won't want to miss. And now, a word from our sponsor. Is your drinks brand looking to start or expand import and distribution?
Whether you're seeking to enter new markets or you're unhappy with a current distributor and desiring a better fit, you should know about Swig Partners.
Founded by industry experts Eric Siegelbaum and Amy Troutmiller, Swig takes the guesswork and the legwork out of distribution strategy. Swig helps brands and distributors find the right fit for long term relationships and sales success.
US based importers and distributors should reach out too. With Swig, they can explore new products for free. And brands, you can get $100 off by mentioning Business of Drinks. Find out more at swigpartners.com/business of drinks. That's swigpartners.com/business of drinks.
David, thanks so much for coming on the Business of Drinks.
Morning, Erica.
We're excited to have you here for so many reasons, which we'll discuss.
Glad to
Um,
be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's hop into the Silver Oak Cellars origin story and how you came to run the company.
Well, so my father was an entrepreneur, and backing way up, he moved to Durango, Colorado in the late 50s and started a ski area there called Purgatory Ski Resort, which is still there. But my dad was the founder. And I like to link that sometimes because he met a Forest Service agent in Durango that knew of a place he thought he could build a ski area. And my dad was kind of the business part beside it and raised the money, and they built a ski area. So that opened in 1965. So fast forward in late 1969, early 1970, my dad was invited out to Napa Valley by a college friend of his that wanted to buy a vineyard. And dad came out here and immediately saw the opportunity. He used to tell the story that he read a report that was published by Bank of America in 1970 that the consumption of wine was going to go from a half a gallon per person to 5 gallons per person over the next 5 years. And I'm talking about half a gallon annually.
Wow, yeah.
So that, that's about a bottle of wine, and or maybe 2 bottles of wine. And so dad was like, well, this is a growth business. So in 1970, he purchased a vineyard in what now is the Alexander Valley. It wasn't even named then, with Jack Novak, whose family later founded Spotswood. So we have and Jack and Mary Novak were my godparents, actually. So
Oh, cool.
we have a wonderful family friendship with Spotswood. So then in 1972, dad bought a dairy farm that was for sale in the middle of Oakville, which is the spiritual home of Silver Oak. And there was a dairy barn there. And he met a young man, kind of like the Forest Service agent, named Justin Meyer, who had just left the Christian Brothers winery. And he actually was Brother Justin, but he renounced his vows, left the Christian Brothers winery, and met my father. And dad said, well, I need somebody to help me plant this dairy farm into vineyards. And Justin was like, well, I want to make wine. And they shook hands and we started Duncan Meyer Cellars.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
we actually have a label that says Duncan Meyer, but thank goodness we never called it that. And And the reason we're called Silver Oak is because we're halfway between the Silverado Trail, which is the highway on the east side of Napa, and the post office at Oakville.
Oh,
And
cool. I
so
didn't know that.
that's where the name came from. And from the first bottling in '72, we've always been Silver Oak. So that's the quick origin story. And Justin's idea was wines at that time were still being very much made in the style of trying to emulate Bordeaux. So they tended to be very tannic. They needed time to, mature. And Justin wanted to make a wine style that was what he termed drinkable upon release. And the way we did that is Justin wanted to use American oak. He was influenced by the great Andrei Chelichev and what was happening at BV and his own experience. And he only wanted to make Cabernet Sauvignon, which at the time was very radical. Everybody made, and in the 70s, people were making Gamay and Chablis and Zinfandel and everything in Napa. But we dedicated ourselves to making Cabernet for Silver Oak from the beginning, and that's still what we do.
Yeah.
And we age the wine for an extra long period of time. So when the wines come out, they're very approachable, but they also will have the balance to library and age for a long time. So there's a lot of history there. So it's not going on too long, but
that's great.
That's how it started.
Well, and then tell me about your background and how you came to run the company.
So, as a child, we would come out here and, Silver Oak was small and we didn't build the original winery here until the early 80s. So it was 10 years after the first vintage that we kind of lived in the dairy barn and we were making wine at Franciscan. That's a whole nother story. But by the time I was in high school, we were coming out here and it was fun. It was like farming and a good time. And then, so when I got out of college, I ended up going to business school at the University of Denver. And at that time, I took the opportunity to finish my MBA by doing a project on Silver Oak. And I wrote a business plan paper, and I actually built the first financial forecasting model for us in Lotus 123. It was in the 90s, a long time ago. And so that got me then involved kind of in the financials and the thinking about the business and fast forward that then led us to ultimately in 2001, we bought out the Meyer family. And so we bought out their share and the Duncan family took full control of Silver Oak in 2001. And then my dad asked me to move here in 2002 and run the business. And I was living in Denver at the time. And so that was a big change for me. I was born and raised in Colorado, and took the opportunity. And, I tell people I crumpled up the next 35 years of my life and threw it over my shoulder and came out here. So I had been around the business for quite a while, but not actually here. Now I've been here, 23 years and it's been a good run.
Totally. And, there now are multiple brands underneath the Silver Oak cellar. So tell me the range of brands.
So we have 5 labels, and each one of them a little bit maybe following in the entrepreneurial spirit of my dad, basically came to us as an opportunity. So the first brand that we started in 1999 is Toomey. And so if you're keeping track of the calendar, at that time we were still partners with the Meyer family. So we started a Duncan family brand called Toomey. Toomey is my grandmother's maiden name. And today Toomey focuses on Appellation and single vineyard Pinot Noir, as well as an estate grown Sauvignon Blanc. And then in 2017, we were very busy. So we started a new brand called Timeless Napa Valley, which is a single vineyard Bordeaux blend and an expression of one of our fantastic vineyard properties called Soda Canyon. And it was a wine that we put into bottle to honor my father's memory. He passed away in 2015. And so Timeless Napa Valley is a single vineyard expression of Soda Canyon. In 2017, we also purchased some very dear friends of mine were the founders of Ovid, which is on Pritchard Hill, an extraordinary estate that had potential to be taken to the next level, I would say, by additional vineyard plantings. And so we purchased Ovid in 2017. I joke that I know this is the business of drinks, so I'll get into the M&A thing. Like, it was not an M&A thing. Mark and Dana, who were the founders of Ovid, were very close friends of mine, and our kids all went to school together, and I have been collecting Ovid since the beginning. So when they told me that they were interested in selling, I jumped on the opportunity.
Mhm.
Um, and then in 2017, we also purchased a historic vineyard in Oregon from Dick Erath, who you probably know the story, or maybe you've ever.
Mhm.
I don't know if you ever met Dick. He was quite a character. Unfortunately, he passed away a year ago. But so we bought Dick Erath's home, which is in Dundee, right off of Warden Hill Road, called Prince Hill. And so this year we launched, after 7 years, we launched Prince Hill as a brand, and we're
Mhm.
making an Oregon Chardonnay and a Dundee Pinot and a single vineyard Pinot from Prince Hill. So those are the five labels that we have
Wow.
under the umbrella today.
Yeah. And so I think there's so much that we can dive into. I think for the purposes of the early part of our conversation, let's focus on Silver Oak specifically. It's become such an iconic brand, and I'm curious to know, what are sort of the key values or selling propositions? What are those brand pillars that you think that have helped it become such a well-known and loved brand?
Well, I think at the beginning, I have to say it tastes good and people love the wine. So, I think we are a unique offering in Napa Valley, from our competitors in that, and that comes from our fruit sourcing. We own more than three-quarters of the vineyards that go into our bottle. And the vineyards we purchase fruit from are all long-term contracts with wonderful grower relationships that we have. So we are maniacally dedicated to making an excellent wine. I think my favorite wine descriptor of Silver Oak is trust. That we make a style of wine year after year that people really enjoy, and we have stuck to that. We have a lot of sayings. So we have another saying that we have yet to make our best bottle of wine. So we do not rest on our laurels or think it's not. There's no recipe to it. It's every year the blend is different, and we do a lot of things to mitigate what Mother Nature throws at us to make a consistent style of wine. If you taste a vertical of Silver Oak, by no means does each vintage taste the same, but they're all Silver Oak. And I like to say Silver Oak is an adjective. The other brand pillar for us is that we use American oak barrels, and that is very unique in our business. And the flavor profile of our barrels adds a dimension to the wine that again, people really enjoy. We also own our own cooperage in Missouri, and so we make almost all the barrels that we use in Silver Oak. We make ourselves. Our other brands actually use French oak, so we're not anti-French oak at all. But for Silver Oak and the style of wine we're making, we use American oak. And then the other thing is that maybe a little more in the modern time is that, and certainly since I have been here, is we've really leaned in heavily to sustainability in the vineyards and at our winery properties. I actually had the opportunity, growing up in Colorado, to be exposed to issues around water and conservation. And my dad was a duck hunter, and ironically, hunters are some of the best conservationists there are. So I was keenly aware of that even in grade school. And so when I came here, we really got curious about what we could do, beginning in the vineyards first of all, and then we had a fire at our winery in Oakville in 2006. It was not a forest fire. The dumpster caught on fire, but it burned down the original building. And we were compelled to rebuild the winery. I'm sitting in that building right now. And so we did things at that time that later allowed us to get certified as a LEED Platinum winery. So we were actually the first LEED Platinum production winery built. And then I know you know this, but listeners don't. When we built a new Alexander Valley winery, which we completed in 2017, and that is also a LEED Platinum winery, and was designated as a living building.
Mhm.
Which means basically that we have net zero energy, water use, recycled materials in the building process, many things that our team was instrumental in creating something that was next level in terms of what you could do for a production facility in the wine business.
And for listeners who are not as familiar with Silver Oak, to benchmark the size, how big is the brand from a production standpoint?
So, we currently, like, this year we'll release about 110 to 120,000 cases, and it's about two-thirds Alexander Valley, under our Alexander Valley appellation, and about one-third under Napa. And so, to put that into some context, the big wine companies make, in some cases, more than 100 million cases.
Yep.
So we're not a tiny winery, but we're also still very boutique. And the way I like to think about it is the Napa Valley production is almost the same as like a French first growth.
Yeah.
The people think those wineries are tiny because they're so expensive, but they make 25 to 35,000 cases, and that's about the same size as our Napa winery.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting to me, I think, the case study of Silver Oak, because Silver Oak, it feels these days like it's everywhere. And my understanding is that the brand and, like, its footprint really has grown significantly over the past decade. And I'm curious to know, what do you think those key levers are that have helped you grow while other brands have really experienced slowdowns or declines?
Well, I think the 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 main thing is just the demand has been there. We have sold out of our wine every year since we were founded, and we have grown very slowly and steadily. If you look at I actually have a chart of our history of production, and so we've grown not that aggressively, but once you've been in it for 53, 54 years, it starts to add up, and we've always maintained that we will not grow bigger than we can make the highest quality bottle of wine that we are trying to make. And so, it is something that we're providing, a product that people want, and there's a lot of people that want it. And so, it has been slow and steady, though. And if you take a step back and look at it sort of from the 30,000-foot view, and we continue to uh, provide. Most of our wine is sold in restaurants, and really we think about the wine being produced to be consumed with food and friends and family. We're not big on scores and trying to, impress the critics necessarily, but we really want to make your moment with the bottle of wine as memorable and as delicious as it can be. And so, we've just continued to be able to, make a little bit more wine each year because we keep selling out.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Well, thinking back over the past 20 plus years now that you've been at the helm, are there particular campaigns or moments that were most impactful in developing the brand?
Well, I think one of the things that it actually predates me, was that our 1974 bottling won the California Gold Medal, which at that time was we don't enter the California State Fair anymore, but at that time was like getting a 100-point score. So we got a lot of attention, and mind you, we don't release our wine for 5 years. So this was in about 1980, and what that led to was then Justin, as our founding winemaker, loved large format bottles. And so the restaurateurs used to show up at the winery because it was the only place you could buy 3 liters, 6 liters, 12 liters. And by the late 80s, we were having this event where there's a day that we make the wine available. In the case of the Napa, it's almost 5 years after the vintage. And we call it release day. And so by the early 90s, we had people spending the night at the winery to be first in line to buy Silver Oak. And that really put us on the map. And, when we talk about cult wines, that was happening before, I won't name any names, but before some of the wines that you would think of, well before some of the wines you would think of as cult wines today, were happening. So we really were the first cult wine where people were spending the night at the winery to purchase wine on the day it was available. So that's really, so like release day today is a wonderful tradition. And our next one will be the 1st of February. I believe that's first Saturday in February for Napa, first Saturday in August for Alexander Valley. And we have, last August we had 800 people show up at the Alexander Valley Winery on release day. So
Wow.
like that is probably one of the seminal things that we enjoy, that is a brand building and a brand enjoyment thing that is unique, and really not too many wineries have that sort of following.
Yeah.
So, I think other things that stick out are really to me, and this would be more under my tenure, in the last 20 years, is we've added significantly to our vineyard holdings. So we
Hmm.
really moved the model from purchasing fruit around the valley to growing wine. And our team's dedication in thinking about literally every berry, every grape bunch that we grow going into a bottle of wine is part of our dedication to quality, and I think that shows up in the bottle. And so I think the wines are getting better and better.
Yeah. And who would you say is the audience for Silver Oak?
Well, I think it's the enjoyer. It's the person that it's a celebration of a moment. We at the winery, we call them bottle stories because we interact with so many thousands of consumers every year, and we hear these stories, and some of them are very poignant. Some of them are sad. People celebrate, their parents passing up to a promotion at their business. To We have engagements here. I've met people with silver oak tattoos. But it's really for people who probably love food, and want to celebrate and think about the having something special for the moment that they're experiencing in their lives. And so I
Yeah.
think that goes, and that's true now. I mean, we're seeing a real shift from the baby boomer to the millennials to the Gen X and Gen Z. And so I think people, and we actually are seeing that in our data. That experience as a human is universal. People
Yeah.
want to enjoy and celebrate. We're about to hit the holiday season, and this is a time to be together with family and friends. And so people that want to enjoy a great bottle of wine will love.
Yeah, I mean, Silver Oak to me is it's just such an interesting brand because I remember we were discussing that about 40% of Silver Oak's customers are Gen X now, followed by baby boomers and then millennials. And this strikes me as a brand that it's hitting on so many levels. So for Gen Xers, I think the things that really appeal about Silver Oak are that heritage and legacy piece of the reputation, the family ownership, and things are characteristics that really tend to really appeal to Gen X. And then for millennials, I find looking at all of Silver Oaks across the footprint of both IRL experiences as well as digital and social, that it's very robust. So there's a lot of events, there's a lot of experiences, there's a lot of touch points and ways to become involved in the brand. And that appeals then to this millennial audience. Like Silver Oak is one of those brands that has successfully bridged the gap without departing from its positioning at all. It's almost like an additive effect. Like the social media engagement and the digital engagement has just, complemented kind of the brand story that was already there. Any thoughts about that?
Well, a couple comments I would make is that several years ago, I was talking to a wine writer, and it was shortly after actually we had built the Oakville winery, and I said to this wine writer, "You got to come by and see what we did," because we had the opportunity to take 35 years of winemaking experience, making one wine in Napa, and build a new winery purpose built for that. And he said, "I'm all about the new. I'm not interested in old wines." And I said to this wine writer, when is being old going to be cool in Napa? Because if you're not 200 years or 400 years old in France or Italy, nobody will even talk to you. Nobody talks about new brands. They talk about the 26 generations of the families, and so I think now we get respect for having been crossing our 50th anniversary a couple of years ago, and I think people lean into that, and that goes back to that trust part. I also think that it goes into our philosophy that I mentioned a minute ago about having yet to make our best bottle of wine. That doesn't just apply to our winemaking or our grape growing; it applies to everything we do. So we don't think about ourselves as stuck or static or being just silver oak. It's like we always have to move forward,
Yeah.
and think about how to do things differently. So we had the opportunity last spring to hire a new chief marketing officer who's bringing a real new energy and excitement to things that we're doing. And we're always getting asked to partner with people and do different things, and so we're leaning into that and doing more collaborations on some spirits brands. And we did this fun collaboration with Paraval, the sustainable suitcase company, and a thing on Fashion Week last fall.
Yeah.
So those kind of ideas are just bring the joy of wine to an audience, and make them think about what they want to purchase when they have the opportunity to drink a great bottle of wine.
Yeah. And it was also interesting to me to hear that you have some sports team partnerships. So tell me about those.
Yes, so that is something we started years ago. So we actually have a formal partnership with the San Francisco Giants, and you can buy a carafe actually of Silver Oak or Toomey Sauvignon Blanc in the stands. And then we also did a partnership with the Golden State Warriors. So we were very early on that. We've and in the general press, there's a lot of sports figures are get into wine when they get their contract, to put it politely. And so there was a wonderful experience a few years ago where Draymond Green and LeBron James bet on a college game, and they bet a case of Silver Oak. LeBron did not tag us correctly, so we didn't get the exact play that we wanted to. But those kind of things, just authentic experience, in the sports world is a
Yeah.
lot of fun for us.
I mean, absolutely. Like that just exposes the Silver Oak brand to potentially an entirely new audience of people. And then I also noticed, on the YouTube page for Silver Oak that there's videos on there that have gotten more than 1 million views, which is remarkable. Like, not many wine brands have that kind of reach unless they're like, doing millions of cases. So, what's the strategy, the social media and digital strategy?
Well, the video that you reference is for the listener is how to open a bottle of wine without a corkscrew. And Sally Allred is the star of that, who is our event manager for the winery, and she's still here, and she's awesome. And so that video is definitely worth watching. I think, again, I think it's to demystify a little bit about what wine is. And I think certainly in like the late '90s and 2000s, as wine became much more ubiquitous in American culture, there is this fear of approachability, and you have to be a somm, or you have to go to school to understand wine. And I just don't think that's true. My philosophy around wine is, drink what you enjoy. And so I think having a little bit more fun with the brand, recognizing how cross-cultural it can be, from doing partnerships with tequila, bourbon, suitcases, a fashion
Mhm.
icon, sports people, all of those different things give us an opportunity to celebrate and have something to enjoy. Again, back to those moments in life. And so I think we'll have more content like that coming in 25, and doing more fun things.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's talk about the challenges. So, I'm sure there have been challenges that you have faced as CEO since taking the reins in 2002. What have some of those been?
Oh my gosh, how much time do we have? So, Mother Nature is tough, and I joke sometimes that my father was a great entrepreneur, but everything he did was involved with Mother Nature, and so I'm keeping my words polite. But we had a fire at our winery in 2006. A month before the fire, we had a flood here. We had 38 inches of water inside the tasting room in Oakville. A month later, it burned down. And a month later, I thought we were going to have the locusts come and take out the vineyards. But we've had obviously we've had we went through the Great Recession in '08, and from a business standpoint, that was a difficult time. People really pulled their horns in, and we're not spending, and we're experiencing a little bit of that right now in beverage alcohols. I'm sure you're keenly aware. And then we had my father passing is a moment that I must mention. That was a tough thing to go through, and how do you carry on? And then, of course, we had the forest fires here in 17 and 19 and 20. And so, we've had to deal with that. I think there's been plenty of challenges along the way. And each vintage, even if you get a frost in the vineyard, or there's always something.
Hmm.
So you have to have a lot of resiliency and a lot of patience to be a vintner and to be in the wine business and to carry on despite the inevitable setbacks that come.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what are some of the? I'm curious to get your thoughts. Just thinking about the year ahead or the years ahead. Everyone has been talking about that the wine market is declining and that luxury wine has maybe not declined as much. But I'm curious to get your perspective on where we're at right now.
Well, I do. I mean, I do believe that we are in a sort of a sea change of consumer preference and what's going to happen. But we also can lean back on the fact that humans have been drinking wine for 6,000 years, and I think when I grew up, we didn't eat butter because margarine was better for you. Like you can't even buy margarine anymore. So I think some of the health claims that have been made are wrong, and there's a lot of science happening right now. I think this will settle out, and I think there's a lot of post-COVID activities happening. Restaurant experience has changed. We all know restaurants have become much more expensive, and the experience is different. And so I think that that's maybe the benefit of having 50 plus years of experience and been through many cycles is we will be here. We just finished the 24 vintage. We won't be selling that vintage until 2029 or 2020 or 2030. So we tend not to be very reactionary. That being said, we're also going to do more marketing activities, more partnerships, be more present in the market, and go out and meet the consumer where they are and share with them why, if you're going to have a great bottle of wine, make sure it's Silver Oak or one of our wines,
Yeah.
at least once a week. That you can drink other wines too, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's it's every good crisis is an opportunity, so we're taking advantage of that.
Well, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
What about the operations to run Silver Oak? How big is the team, and where has it grown or shifted to respond to recent market changes?
Well, we have a fairly complicated operation over a pretty wide geography, and that's really due to our commitment to quality. So, like for Silver Oak, we have two wineries, one in Napa Valley, one in Alexander Valley, and we only make one wine at each of those wineries. The practical thing to do would be to move into a warehouse, down by the airport in Napa, and have one giant facility where you make all the wines. But we want to be close to the source, close to the vineyards, and we want the team that's focused on those wines to be focused on what's going into each bottle. And same for Toomey. We actually have three different locations for Toomey, and in Oregon we actually custom crush, but because we don't have a winery there yet. But those are make for a fairly complicated organization. We also have tasting rooms at each facility, so we have a wonderful, unbelievable hospitality staff. If you come visit wine country, whether it's in Sonoma County or Napa County, you can have an experience at our wineries. And then we also do all of our own fulfillment. So if you purchase wine from the winery that we ship to you, we do that in-house. And that's, again, a quality commitment. Most wineries use a third-party shipper to do that, and we have a whole team that does that. So if you call somebody, you're calling a member of what we call the whole bunch, which is our wonderful staff, and so it's an operation.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm wanted to ask you about your advice. So, if you were advising an up and coming entrepreneur in the drinks business on how to build their brand, a brand that has staying power, what would you tell them?
Um, So in my business training, I always learned what and I put this in quotes, not to should on people, but what I could say is in my experience, it takes time. They say in the wine business, it takes 20 years to make a profit. And that was almost exactly true for us. It is a difficult, time consuming, step by step business. So, I think my advice to a young entrepreneur, and I've had the opportunity to actually have this conversation with people, is to be patient and to be very resilient and to stick to what you believe. And I've seen in my experience here brands really pivot to try and meet where they think the consumer's going, and frankly, it doesn't work.
Mhm.
I think you need to have a vision and to stick to it. To stick to it attitude to make it happen. And I think it's easier in spirits where you can make changes much more quickly. It's a totally different production process. But I think especially in fine wine, it really does take time, and so that I think patience would be my number one piece of advice.
Yeah. And looking ahead, we have, it feels like health is always, especially right now, just on everyone's mind as the new dietary guidelines will be coming out. Um, we have the economy, we have all sorts of challenges. What do you think are the biggest challenges coming down the pike for the wine industry? And how is Silver Oak preparing for those?
Well, I think we need to get to logic and science around the health and wellness aspect of wine in your life. I personally am not that young, and I'm pretty fit, and I'm going skiing for the holidays, and I enjoy wine. And so there is, and that's always been our philosophy, is to have wine as part of a healthy, balanced lifestyle. So people don't really drink our wine to get buzzed, if I can say that. They drink the wine to enjoy their food, to pair it, to have that enjoyment. And so it's not something you drink. Everybody gets their own bottle of wine and drinks a whole bottle of wine. It's meant to be shared by the bottle. And so, I think, and some of the things that have happened particularly in the last year around, the politics behind like what the World Health Organization did. I don't want to get too far into this, but is is just has not been based in logic and science. It's been based in opinion and witch hunting. And so I think that there is now there's, I don't know if I call it a backlash, but there's a response to this, what was happening, that is getting more solid. And I think again, I lean on the fact that I know many people in their 80s and 90s that have lived wonderful lives, that have enjoyed wine for their entire life. And so I think that's okay. And so it is a challenge for the industry, and I think it's going to affect brands. There's no question. People are probably not going to make it.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a cycle, and it's a wave. And so we're at a peak of and Oura rings and Ozempic and Wegovy and all the blockers and all that stuff is changing. But I'd much rather have somebody who feels great about themselves and wants to have a glass of wine than a hedonist that
Yeah.
is overdoing it. So,
Yeah.
so I think there's definitely room for it in our lives, and that's why I mentioned margarine, because I mean, you remember probably when eggs were bad for you, right? Now
Right, right.
now
And then
everybody tells you to eat eggs.
Snackwells. Remember
You know,
Snackwells? Those like
yeah,
sugary cookies that were supposed to like be the diet cookie. Like all of these things have then later been disproven. So
yes,
yeah,
yes, and I think we know that to be true from 6,000 years of history of humans enjoying. Maybe fine wine's only been around for a couple hundred years, but
yeah,
but uh, but it is. I think it is a cycle.
yeah. And what's next for Silver Oak? What's next in 2025?
Ooh, I wish I could really share. Um, I think the thing that I personally want to do is get out of the winery and be more present with our consumer, and I'm excited about that. So that's what I'm personally planning to do. We have some really fun marketing things coming up. We are in February. We'll release the 2020 vintage of Napa. So those are always things that we celebrate. As I mentioned, release day, and excited to have that out in the market. So the wine's excellent. So and I think you're going to see some more partnerships and marketing initiatives and fun
Mhm.
things for us
Mhm.
coming in 2025, which are well under the planning stages right now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, before we hop off that I think I do want to touch on that for just one more minute because I think it's important from my perspective for brands to understand that you can have big partnerships with like NBA teams or whatever it might be, but I think that what really appeals to a lot of people about Silver Oak is that it has become a brand that they can personally connect to. So, for example, the what is it? The stories that you do, or remind me what they're called.
Bottle
The
stories.
bottle stories. The bottle stories, I know that those have been on the Silver Oak website, and they're these blog stories of how people have celebrated with wines in their lives. And I'm curious to know a little bit about how you choose who to highlight and what that looks like, because I think that one thing Silver Oak does so well that other brands can do that does not cost a lot of money is to simply engage with people online. So when I see people tagging Silver Oak social media responds to them and says like, thanks so much for joining us, or thanks so much for, celebrating with a bottle of Silver Oak, what have you. Like the type of brand engagement that I've seen from Silver Oak of like celebrating its community is fairly more substantial than I see a lot of other brands do. So let's focus on that for one more second before we hop off that topic. Tell me about the philosophy of personal connection.
Well, I mean, I think I go back to enjoyers, and we love our fans and our consumers, and we if you come have an experience at the winery, it's very personal. We have people that have worked in our tasting room for more than 30 years. And I always make a point if I'm walking through the tasting room to say hi to somebody or stop or listen to their story. It's incredibly, rewarding personally, and also, I'm doing a little market research as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, the bottle stories happen one bottle at a time, and that is part of our philosophy. That's the way we think about it. So we're not necessarily after like the collector or somebody who's going to come in and buy $5,000 worth of wine. Those single bottle experiences are so important, and it's incredibly gratifying. I mean, I personally have had thousands of interactions with consumers hearing their stories. I have so many stories I could share, and I cherish each one because those bottle stories are incredible. So to get to your question, when social media became a thing, we jumped on it pretty early, and I had the realization that as well as the team, that when somebody sends out an Instagram post about their experience, there's a real person out there, just like they were standing in the tasting room in front of you. And so to engage with them, and by the way, our team will be thrilled that you noticed that, is something we have a responsibility to do. Otherwise, somebody's saying thank you and you're not responding.
Yeah.
We want to say you're welcome and thank you for enjoying our bottle of wine. So we will definitely continue to do that, and are leaning into that in a bigger way.
Yeah.
Who knows with the way technology is moving, what we'll be doing 5 years from now, but we have to stay relevant. We have to stay, on top of where the consumer is. And it's not just the younger. I was about to say the younger consumer. That's not true. Everybody's on Instagram pretty much,
Yeah.
and so it like those type of social media touches are just as important as saying thank you. I mean, I make a habit, if I see a bottle of Silver Oak in a restaurant, I will walk up to a table and thank the people. I don't know them.
Yeah.
Generally, by the time I'm done telling them that I'm the second generation owner, they're pretty pleased.
Yeah.
I haven't had too many negative experiences with that, but I appreciate. I think our whole team, the whole bunch, appreciates our consumer just as much as the consumer appreciates the bottle of wine and what goes into it.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So, last question. So a drinks entrepreneur asks you for a recommendation. It could be anything, a book or a course or a person to follow on LinkedIn, what have you. Who would you recommend to provide, or what would you recommend to provide the greatest insights?
So I have two answers. One is from a business standpoint. I am a huge fan of Jim Collins, and I actually got to know Jim many years ago in Colorado. I have had the great honor of being a critical writer on two of his books. So my name, along with about 100 other people, is in his books. But his thinking and the rigor that he went around to coming up with the ideas that he has from how to run a business in Good to Great, Great by Choice, Built to Last, his books, I highly recommend to young entrepreneurs, to CEOs. I think those books are fabulous, and we apply that thinking all the time at the winery. We could do a whole podcast just on how I think about Jim Collins at Silver Oak.
Nice.
So that's one. The second one is I just finished reading Three Body Problem by Chixin Liu.
Yeah.
And not watching the show that came out, but because of the show, my son, who's a voracious reader and a very bright young man, I told him, I was like, I want to read this book, and he goes, "Oh, Dad, I read that when it came out, like 6 years ago." But that book blew me away, thinking about the size and scale of space and how we occupy this tiny speck of anything, in the reality of the whole book. So that was the other one that I thought of that I again experienced recently. I think it's more than 1,000 pages, and I finished it in under 10 days. I was like,
oh wow!
I just could not put it down.
Yeah,
And the book, I mean, the series was great. I did watch it, but the book is better.
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that.
So those are my two.
Yeah, I know. Get the cosmic energy going. I did read that book, but I will say that a lot of it kind of flew over my head.
Oh, me too. Me too. Yeah.
There was a lot of the technical, more space stuff that I was like, I don't even understand how that works.
yeah. Maybe that's why I read it so fast, because I was feeling that part.
It was fascinating though, and I did love the series. All right, well, David, this has been such a pleasure. I always enjoy talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on The Business of Drinks.
Well, thank you so much, Erica. It's always a pleasure, and anytime. And if you get out here, you got to come visit. So right. Please have a wonderful holiday. Thank you so much for the time, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome to Last Call. Today, Scott and I are discussing the U.S. Surgeon General's warning on alcohol. So recently, Dr. Vivek Murthy issued a new advisory warning that linked alcohol consumption and increased cancer risk. I'm sure if you work in the industry, you probably have been discussing this. But the report said alcohol is the third leading preventable cause of cancer in the U.S. after tobacco and obesity, and called for alcoholic products to have additional labels warning of that risk. And I've been talking to a lot of people in the industry who have seemed initially fairly concerned about this new warning and what it might mean in the consumer landscape. And then I decided to take a look at what the markets were saying. So I looked at a couple different analyst reports, like from Citibank and from RBC, Royal Bank of Canada. And I found some interesting statistics in there that I thought was worth sharing. So RBC recently put out a report comparing the alcohol warning label potential, like what does that mean for the markets? And they compared it to tobacco case studies. So from 2000 to 2017, the tobacco industry saw a huge amount of litigation. But despite all of that, during that more or less 20-year period, tobacco stocks significantly outperformed the broader market, which I found fascinating. And, in their findings, the addition of alcohol or of tobacco warnings on tobacco, cigarette packages did not actually cause a huge deterrent to consumers from buying those products. So that actually was like a counter narrative to what what I had been seeing in the marketplace. So I wanted to talk with Scott about this. Scott, what are your thoughts about this development and how it may play out?
Yeah, it's a particularly exciting topic, and I mean, I think it's first really important to separate some of the emotional connection, right, that we might have as professionals in this industry. Separate the anecdotal, right? I've been drinking for so long, and I've been feeling fine from right the data. And we know a few things when we look at the data, and we look at the reality of the situation. First, knowledge of this topic is relatively low. Most consumers in the United States are not familiarized with the link between heavy consumption and cancer rates. And given the news cycle, it is not likely that the simple new advisory warning makes most consumers aware of that, or they've absorbed that. If you look at Google Trends over the past week and a half around the announcement, it soared when you look for the term alcohol warning in Google Trends. It popped and then it disappeared within the course of a week or so. We also know that alcohol companies, like tobacco companies, have already long been diversifying their offerings to include non-alc, to include energy drinks, to include water, coffee, tea, all different offerings that allow them to operate as businesses quite differently, and a little bit more agile in the marketplace. And the parallel or analogy of tobacco is also, I think, a little misguided because, unlike alcohol, which might have the potential for additional warnings, tobacco's usage was banned in a number of places, right? You can't
Right.
have a cigarette on a plane. You can't have it in a park. I would feel confident in stating that I don't believe that alcohol will be banned at restaurants
Yeah.
or in sports stadiums. And that is a major difference. That being said, the concerns around general secular decline of alcohol consumption are, I'd say, foremost in the top of my mind, but they have little to do with these warnings.
Yeah, and I do think that the potential impact here does not seem like it will be that significant. So, we know that policy changes take a long time to be fully implemented. And it does take an act of Congress for that to actually happen. It's also unclear if the new administration is going to support that change. But I think what I found so fascinating about the tobacco case studies was that from 2000 to 2005, which were the peak litigation years for tobacco, that industry returned 27% annually, which was higher than the S&P 500. Wait, I found that actually pretty shocking. I did not realize that. That was news to me. So, it goes to show that the sky is not falling in the bev alc industry, right? That we do not need to be running for the hills and finding new jobs and like getting out of this sector. Sure, there may be some shockwaves along the way, and it may prevent, like, things like this may prevent new money from like entering into that sector, or may prevent VCs or private equity like from like getting into even more into this vice category or exiting this vice category. But it's not to say that these companies and portfolios are not going to continue to perform. So I think that is something for drinks brands to consider as another factor in their long-term planning, is that we really do not know how it's going to play out, but the sky is not falling. We are not Chicken Little. So any final thoughts there, Scott?
Yeah, as if it weren't enough with regard to potential, right? Tariff concerns, inflation, generational behavioral shifts. Here's another thing, but if alcohol has proven one thing, it is relatively resilient when you look at the category as a whole, right? There are certainly segments and categories that might go up or might go down, but over the last 20, 30 years, as a whole, the pie has grown, and I don't see that changing, even with this blip of this new advisory warning.
Well, let's leave it on that high note. All right. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.